Have you ever asked yourself this one quiet question before drifting off to sleep? What is my bedroom silently saying to me? It may sound strange. After all, a bedroom is just a room, right? A few walls, some furniture, a bed, maybe a plant or a picture frame. But what if I told you that the space you sleep in is far more than physical? That it's not just where you rest your bedroom, but a living, breathing field of energy that speaks to your subconscious mind all night long? Before we dive deeper into that quiet world, may I ask for something simple? If this message resonates with you, if this channel has ever helped you feel more present, more aligned, or simply more curious about the invisible layers of life, I'd be deeply grateful if you could tap like, subscribe, or share this video. I'm on a journey to reach 1,000 mindful hearts, and your small act of support helps these teachings travel further. Now, back to that space. You may think you're alone when you lie in bed at night, but you're not. You're lying beside your phone, glowing silently on the nightstand. You're mirrored back to yourself in glass across the room. You're being watched by a photo, remembered by a letter, or stared at by a task left unfinished. You're breathing in the perfume of a dying flower. You're carrying the energetic signature of every object within reach. And it's not that any of these things are bad. It's just that we've never been taught to see them clearly. We've never been shown how the invisible layers of our environment shape our sleep, our mood, and even our spiritual well-being. In today's episode, we're going to journey into the hidden world of your bedroom, not to judge, but to become conscious. Because when we start seeing our living spaces with awakened eyes, we no longer become victims of invisible fatigue, tension, or emotional disquiet. We become designers of our own peace. And this is New Day Mindfulness. In this video, we will explore 7 unexpected items that could be draining your energy at night, disturbing your rest, and subtly rewiring your inner world while you sleep. We'll begin with what seems most obvious: electronic devices, the glowing lifelines to our waking world. But as we move through each section, we'll go deeper into subtle energies, symbols, and even psychological shadows that might be hiding in plain sight. On your nightstand, under your pillow, or framed on the wall above your bed, these are not superstitions. They're invitations. Invitations to clear the space where your body goes to surrender, where your soul meets silence, where your dreams unfold, and where your energy either restores or depletes. We will walk through how digital devices keep the mind on high alert long after you have closed your eyes, how mirrors reflect not only light, but your own unconscious restlessness, why sharp objects, yes, even decorative ones, create an energy of defense and agitation, how sacred or sentimental items placed too close may pull you back into memory rather than allowing you to let go. The truth about nightlights and how artificial illumination confuses your circadian wisdom. Why your books and work folders may be whispering unfinished stories into your mind long after midnight. And finally, the surprising reality of plants and flowers. Why even beauty, if not mindfully placed, can disrupt the sacred stillness your body craves. You'll hear stories, real stories, of students and clients who unknowingly carried their burdens into their bedrooms, only to find profound transformation by removing just 1 or 2 items. You'll hear science from neuroscientists and psychologists who confirm what ancient traditions already knew. And you'll hear wisdom from Buddhism and beyond that will change the way you think about rest forever. Because sleep is not simply the end of your day. It is the sacred pause between chapters. A reset, a healing, a moment when your entire system, physical, emotional, spiritual, descends into silence to be rebuilt from within. And what surrounds you in that moment matters. So before you lay your head down tonight, let's first explore the hidden architecture of your bedroom. Not the paint color, not the furniture, but the energy. Let's get started. Section 1, electronic devices. Quieting the digital storm before sleep. In today's hyper-connected world, electronic devices have become not just tools, but extensions of ourselves. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, smartwatches, Bluetooth speakers, and even smart alarm clocks populate our bedrooms with an invisible storm of frequencies, light, in subtle psychological cues that have far-reaching effects on our inner world. For many, the last thing they see before sleep is the glow of a screen. The first thing they reach for in the morning is also their phone. While this pattern may feel modern and efficient, it may be contributing to the rising global crisis in sleep quality, mental fatigue, emotional numbness, and even spiritual stagnation. Let's dive deeper into why these devices matter, what science and Buddhism have to say, and how we can begin to reclaim our bedrooms as sacred sanctuaries of renewal. 1. The silent disruptor. Why smartphones near your bed are a hidden threat. At first glance, a phone on your nightstand seems harmless. But what if it's not? Let's consider a simple fact. Electronic devices emit low-frequency electromagnetic radiation, EMR, invisible blue light. These emissions interact directly with the body's neurological, hormonal, and energetic systems. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine revealed that individuals who kept smartphones within arm's reach at night experienced more fragmented sleep, longer time to fall asleep, also known as sleep latency, and a marked reduction in REM sleep quality, the sleep phase critical for memory processing, creativity, and emotional healing. The National Sleep Foundation has consistently warned that exposure to blue light from screens inhibits melatonin production, the hormone that tells your body it's time to rest. Without melatonin, your sleep becomes shallow and your dreams become elusive. In Buddhist terminology, this intrusion of artificial stimulation into the sacred space of rest could be categorized as a modern form of vipaka, karmic results. The karma here arises from habitual distraction, moha, and attachment, lobha, leading to restlessness, udaka, one of the 5 hindrances to spiritual clarity. 2. The mind doesn't sleep when the body does. One of the central principles in Buddhist psychology is that the mind has layers of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep consciousness. Even when the body is still, the sit-yin mind-part complex continues processing impressions, memories, and subtle energies. When a smartphone is within reach, it becomes not just a physical object, but a mental symbol of activity, communication, and mental arousal. Even if it's turned off, the association it holds in your subconscious, notifications, texts, responsibilities, news, continues to stimulate underlying anxiety. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, has said in multiple interviews that your brain doesn't stop responding to environmental cues just because your eyes are closed. What's near you, the ambient light, and even inaudible frequencies can alter brain activity during sleep. This aligns remarkably well with Buddhist awareness of the energy field, ayatana, and its sensitivity to what we call sankhara, conditioned phenomena. 3. Mental restlessness as a form of suffering. The Buddhist tradition often defines suffering, dukkha, not just as physical pain, but as the agitation that arises from being disconnected from our true nature. A restless mind, continually interrupted by digital chatter, finds it increasingly difficult to settle, reflect, and absorb the teachings, Dhamma. Thich Nhat Hanh once remarked, "When we allow our mind to consume too much, we become spiritually bloated." A phone beside the bed is not neutral. It acts like a subtle cord, pulling your mind toward the outer world even as you attempt to return inward. People often underestimate the psychological weight of their notifications. For example, consider a person receiving a late-night work email that they don't open but see on the lock screen. Their heart rate increases slightly. Cortisol spikes. Even if they choose not to open the message, the seed of unease is already planted. That emotional residue does not disappear when the phone is set down. It follows them into their dreamscape. 4. Examples from public figures. What do the successful do? Barack Obama is known for his extreme discipline with technology. During his presidency, he rarely slept with his phone nearby. Instead, he had a routine of disconnecting in the evening, reading a physical book, and spending time in quiet reflection. His reasoning wasn't just political, it was energetic. Leaders need clarity, and clarity comes from mental spaciousness. Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post, famously collapsed from exhaustion due to overwork and sleep deprivation. That incident led her to write The Sleep Revolution, in which she explicitly advises readers to remove phones and electronics from the bedroom entirely. She even created a line of sleepwear for phones, small beds to tuck your devices into, symbolically separating work life from rest life. NBA superstar LeBron James, in an interview with ESPN, said, "I don't bring electronics to bed. I don't want notifications or anything messing with my sleep." He emphasized that his performance on the court was directly tied to the quality of his recovery, and that began with how he managed his bedtime environment on a tent. These are not monks. These are highly driven, high-performing individuals who have discovered through experience what Buddhist monks knew thousands of years ago. The mind requires sacred space to recharge and recover. 5. The energetic field, a Buddhist view of space and vibration. According to Buddhist cosmology in the Abhidhamma, all matter vibrates. All energy fields, including those from our bodies and from objects, interact with one another constantly. The bedroom is a particularly sensitive field, akin to a spiritual sanctuary, because it is where the conscious mind surrenders and deeper processes begin. Placing a device that emits radiation and mental agitation in this sensitive space is akin to meditating next to a loud radio. You may not consciously hear it, but your nervous system does. You may fall asleep, but you don't fully rest. You may wake up, but you don't fully rise. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches about the importance of mindfulness bells to reawaken the present moment. The issue is, our phones have become the opposite. They are distraction bells. And when these bells ring near our beds, they pull us away from deep presence and toward fragmented attention. 6. Emotional detox versus digital re-exposure. Sleep is not just about muscle repair. It is also the time when emotional processing happens. The dreaming phase, REM sleep, helps the brain to reorganize, de-stress, and even make peace with difficult emotions. But studies have shown that checking your phone late at night re-exposes your mind to digital garbage. News headlines, envy-inducing social media, work obligations, comparison, fear-based media, etc. Instead of detoxing, your emotional body is being repolluted. This is why many people experience disturbing dreams, vague anxiety upon waking, or an invisible sense of burden. Even if nothing bad has happened, they are sleeping with emotional toxins that didn't have time to be released. Buddhist practice calls this clinging. The mind continues to hold on to stimuli it has not digested. 7. The path to liberation. What you can do. Starting tonight. Step 1. Oshanen. Move your device away, if possible, out of the bedroom entirely. If that's not realistic, place it in a drawer, or at least 3 meters away from the bed, and turn it off or on airplane mode. Step 2. Replace the habit. The Buddha taught that one cannot remove a mental habit unless one replaces it with a wholesome one. Try substituting the pre-bed scrolling with a mindfulness activity, journaling, sipping warm tea, breathing meditation, or listening to soft ambient chants. Step 3. Redefine your intention. Instead of ending the day in digital consumption, close your eyes and offer a simple prayer or affirmation. May my body rest in ease. May my mind be at peace. May I sleep like the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, untouched by worldly winds. Step 4. Use a traditional alarm clock. Many people keep phones nearby for alarms, but there are low EMF or analog alarm clocks available now. Some even simulate sunrise to wake you naturally. Step 5. Create sacred space. You can keep a small altar, a candle, a peaceful plant, or even a framed quote near your bed. Let these objects be anchors for silence, not triggers for activity. 8. Final reflection. Your sleep is not just a biological event, it is a spiritual ceremony, an invitation for the soul to journey inward, to reset, to cleanse. What you keep close to you during this time matters. Your devices may serve you during the day, but at night let them rest too. If you honor the transition from doing to being, from alertness to surrender, from stimulation to stillness, you'll begin to experience the deep rest the Buddha spoke of. Not just physical sleep, but the resting of the self. And from that sacred stillness, true insight begins to rise. Section 2. Mirrors. Reflections of the restless mind. In the stillness of night, when the lights go out and the world begins to fade, most of us seek the soft comfort of rest. But what if something in your room, something seemingly silent and motionless, was subtly disrupting the most sacred hours of your day? What if that beautiful mirror across the room, or above your dresser, or hanging opposite your bed, was not only reflecting your image, but echoing your energy back at you? While mirrors are often associated with self-reflection, clarity, and beauty, they also carry a hidden weight, an energetic ripple that can silently disturb the mind's equilibrium. This idea might seem strange at first, but if we look at it through the lenses of Buddhist wisdom, environmental psychology, and personal experience, a clearer picture begins to emerge. In Buddhism, the mirror holds a sacred metaphor. The mind, when calm and undefiled, is likened to a polished mirror, capable of reflecting all things clearly, without attachment. But when dust accumulates, or when movement ripples across its surface, the reflection becomes distorted. This metaphor doesn't end at the symbolic. In traditional monastic living quarters, mirrors are used sparingly and almost never placed in a position where they reflect the bed. Why? Because the resting space is meant to be a zone of deep restoration, not a place of reflection, movement, or energetic feedback. Ajahn Chah, one of the great Thai forest masters, once said, "The mind watches even in sleep. What it sees, it remembers. What it remembers, it becomes." In this light, having a mirror facing the bed means the subconscious mind never truly retreats into stillness. It continues watching and being watched. From a psychological standpoint, mirrors are powerful. They reflect not only light, but also movement. Even in a dark room with nothing moving, the human brain is highly attuned to subtle shifts in contrast and reflection. This is an evolutionary adaptation. In ancient times, being able to detect movement in low light could mean the difference between life and death. When your half-asleep eyes catch your own shadowy reflection, or worse, that of your partner, it can create a moment of confusion. The amygdala, the brain's fear processing center, activates briefly. You may not fully wake, but your nervous system does. This micro-alert pulls you out of deeper phases of sleep, particularly the REM state responsible for emotional processing and memory integration. Repeated over time, these micro-disruptions add up to chronic fatigue, dream fragmentation, and a general sense of emotional imbalance upon waking. According to Dr. Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep and one of the world's foremost sleep experts, the brain remains subtly aware of its surroundings even during sleep. In fact, one hemisphere of the brain often stays in guard mode in unfamiliar environments, a phenomenon known as the first night effect. Now imagine that your brain is not only sensing the general environment, but is also confronted night after night with a visual stimulus like a mirror. Though you are unconscious, your visual cortex receives residual signals. The image may be low in clarity, but it is movement responsive. The brain doesn't need a high-resolution image to react, just the perception of potential motion or light. In essence, mirrors activate the alert system of the brain. They suggest presence, feedback, and watching. For this reason, many psychologists now recommend removing mirrors from the bedroom altogether, especially those that directly face the bed. Years ago, I met a retired naval officer named David at a meditation intensive in California. Stoic, disciplined, and highly analytical, he was not a man easily swayed by spiritual metaphors. But he shared a strange story with me over tea. For several months after moving into a new home, David found himself waking at odd hours, 2:47, 3:16, 4:05, with a distinct sensation that someone was in the room. Each time he would sit up, scan the space, and eventually realize it was just his reflection, or the reflection of his dog, moving slightly in the full-length mirror across from the bed. He said, "It felt like there was a third presence in the room, even though I knew rationally it was just a mirror. I couldn't shake the feeling." At the suggestion of his yoga teacher, David covered the mirror with a thick tapestry at night. The waking episode stopped immediately. "I thought it was woo-woo nonsense," he admitted, "but it worked, and I don't argue with what works." His experience echoes that of many others. Whether or not one believes in energetic disturbances, the psychological and neurophysiological responses are real and measurable. In Buddhist cosmology, space, akasha, is not empty, it is alive. It holds memory, vibration, and subtle impressions. The bedroom, particularly the area where the body lies in deep vulnerability, is a sacred space for purification. Monastics are often trained to treat their bedding area with reverence. No excessive light, no clutter, no sharp objects, and no reflective surfaces. These rules aren't arbitrary. They are based on centuries of observing how subtle energies behave in spaces dedicated to stillness. A mirror is a symbol of duality, self and reflection, watcher and watched. When placed near the bed, it introduces that duality into a space that should be unified and inward. Instead of surrendering to deep sleep, the soul may hover on the edge of consciousness, held back by a subconscious awareness of being seen. In Tibetan dream yoga, practitioners are taught to reduce external stimulation as much as possible before sleep, precisely so that the dream state can be entered with lucidity and serenity. A mirror's presence can obstruct that process by reinforcing material reality, even in subtle ways. You might be surprised to learn that many high-performance individuals have, knowingly or unknowingly, adopted the no mirror rule in their bedrooms. Oprah Winfrey once shared in an interview that she avoids having any large mirrors or screens in her bedroom. "I need the space to feel clean," she said. "I need it to be mine, not a place full of projections or reflections." Benedict Cumberbatch, during his meditation retreat, preparation for the role of Doctor Strange, reportedly had all mirrors removed from his sleeping quarters. His sleep coach told him that actors, who already deal with constant scrutiny, are especially vulnerable to mirror-induced mental chatter. Deepak Chopra, a pioneer in mind-body wellness, has also spoken about the impact of mirror placement in the home. "The house speaks to the soul," he said. "Mirrors should never point at the bed, they split the energy." These individuals are not monks or ascetics. They are people navigating high-stress, high-profile lives. But they understand something essential. The mind's rest is fragile, and environmental harmony is not a luxury, it's a necessity. When we enter the dream state, the conscious mind dissolves and the symbolic mind takes over. Everything becomes metaphor. A cat becomes a memory. A staircase becomes a choice. A mirror in the room, though unseen, becomes an energetic metaphor for self-surveillance. It can keep the mind looping, observing, analyzing, rather than surrendering to the dreamscape. Lucid dreamers often report that mirrors in dreams are portals, strange, unpredictable, and at times unsettling. Now imagine sleeping next to a literal portal every night. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, your dreaming self may be engaging with it on some level. Buddhism teaches us that the dreaming mind is a training ground. If we clutter that ground with unnecessary stimuli, we make it harder to harvest insight, vipassana, from our dream states. What to do instead? Creating a mirror-conscious bedroom. Relocate full-length mirrors. If possible, move them to the hallway, dressing room, or bathroom. Cover with cloth. Use a soft, light-absorbing fabric, in cotton or linen, to cover the mirror at night. This is not just a functional act. It's a ritual, a message to the mind. You are safe, you are unwatched, you may rest. Position mirrors away from the bed. If the mirror must stay in the bedroom, place it where it reflects a wall, plant, or furniture, not the sleeping space. Practice mirror mindfulness. Each time you look into a mirror, do so consciously. Remind yourself, this is a reflection, not a definition. This trains the mind to disidentify with the image, reducing attachment. Add energy balancing elements. Consider placing a grounding object near the bed, such as a piece of obsidian, a small singing bowl, or a soft light diffuser, to stabilize the room's energetic flow. Final thought. Returning to stillness. The mirror, like the mind, can be a source of clarity or distortion. In our waking hours, mirrors help us groom and prepare. But in sleep, we are meant to dissolve, to become shinol, undefined, and whole. By removing or covering mirrors, we symbolically allow ourselves to release control, identity, and the need for constant reflection. We give ourselves permission to rest, not as a self, a persona, or a body, but as pure awareness. As Zen Master Dogen once said, when you forget the self, you become the 10,000 things. Perhaps the journey to peace begins with one less thing, especially one that reflects us when we're trying to let go. Section 3. Sharp objects, when energy becomes aggressive. In the natural world, nothing is inherently good or bad, only suitable or unsuitable for a particular purpose. A knife, for instance, can be used to harvest food or cause harm. But what happens when such a tool intended for utility begins to take on a silent, psychological presence in our personal spaces, especially in the room meant for rest? In the spiritual traditions of Buddhism and many indigenous energy-based systems, the shape, material, and intention behind objects in our home carry subtle but measurable influence on the human nervous system and mental state. Sharp objects such as scissors, knives, letter openers, razors, needles, or even harsh, angular furniture are among the most energetically yang or aggressive items we unconsciously live with. And when they are stored or displayed near where we sleep, they may begin to send signals to our deeper mind, disrupting the inner harmony we seek. In early Buddhist texts, the Buddha taught extensively about the influence of ayatana, sense bases, and rupa, forms or objects. According to the Abhidhamma, the Buddhist analysis of consciousness and reality, objects are not lifeless. Their shape, function, and association can condition mental states. Sharp objects, by their nature, symbolize separation, division, precision, and even aggression. A knife cuts, scissors divide. These are not gentle actions. When such items are kept close to the resting body, the subtle body which stays active even in sleep registers a kind of threat. This doesn't always manifest in nightmares or panic attacks. Often it shows up as low-grade anxiety, restlessness, or emotional fatigue upon waking. Environmental psychologists refer to this as form-based stress. It's the feeling of unease we get when a room is filled with too many pointed angles, spiky decor, or aggressive lines. The body prefers curves, circles, and soft textures, especially in rest zones. When surrounded by sharp forms, our autonomic nervous system remains more alert than necessary. Recent research from the University of Texas, Austin, found that hospital patients recovered faster and reported less lit stress in rooms decorated with round-edged furniture, soft patterns, and nature-themed art, as compared to those placed in rooms with industrial, angular furnishings. Because our brains evolved in nature where curves and flowing lines dominate the landscape. Neuroscience explains this through the lens of threat perception. Sharp lines and pointed forms are often interpreted by the amygdala as potential threats. Even if we rationally understand that the scissors on the desk aren't going to hurt us, our subconscious may still activate a micro-defense response when we perceive those forms while falling asleep. In short, your body responds to your environment, even when your conscious mind doesn't. In the practice of Buddhist mindfulness, sati, the external is often used as a mirror for the internal. A cluttered home may reflect a cluttered mind. A peaceful altar reflects a peaceful heart. So what might the presence of sharp, aggressive items in the bedroom indicate? Sometimes it points to unresolved internal conflict, stressful work-life boundaries, relationships marked by tension, or self-critical thought patterns. The body becomes accustomed to subtle forms of threat and may begin to interpret even rest as a state of vigilance. I once worked with a woman named Julia who had recurring dreams of being chased or attacked. She kept a letter opener and a set of large sewing scissors on her nightstand, just in case. But when she removed those objects and replaced them with a rose quartz crystal and a small potted lavender plant, her dream shifted. For the first time in months, she told me, I woke up feeling like my body wasn't bracing for something. This is not magic. It's resonance. The energy of what surrounds us seeps into the mind and body, reinforcing patterns, positive or negative. In a Jataka tale, a story of the Buddha's past lives, a young monk had trouble sleeping and was frequently disturbed by troubling dreams. When asked about his sleeping habits, he admitted to keeping a ceremonial dagger under his pillow for protection. The senior monk advised him gently, when the hand holds fear, the heart cannot hold peace. Replace your blade with a mantra. The young monk followed the advice, placing a palm leaf scroll with a handwritten verse of the Metta Sutta, the teaching on loving kindness, under his pillow instead. His sleep became serene, and his dreams transformed into images of light and safety. The lesson is clear. What we keep near our head while we sleep influences not only our physical body, but our energetic and dream bodies. Sharpness in the room invites sharpness in the heart. Though rarely discussed explicitly, many influential people have embraced minimalist and non-aggressive bedroom environments to optimize sleep and reduce cognitive stress. Steve Jobs was known for living in almost empty spaces, particularly his bedroom. A lamp, a cushion, and a small stereo for classical music were all he kept. While not Buddhist in practice, Jobs was deeply influenced by Zen design principles: simplicity, harmony, and intentional emptiness. Marie Kondo, the Japanese organizing consultant whose KonMari method gained global fame, also advises against keeping sharp tools in sleeping areas. Her reasoning is spiritual and energetic. She sees the home as an organism that responds to the emotions of its inhabitants. Sharp objects, in her view, promote overstimulation and emotional imbalance. In 2017, Vogue profiled Beyoncé's wellness routine and noted that she prefers sanctuary-like bedroom setups: clean, round-edge furniture, soft textures, and no clutter on the nightstand. "I need a place where my brain can go soft," she said. In Buddhist psychology, external objects can reflect karma or reinforce kleshas, mental afflictions such as anger, jealousy, or attachment. Interestingly, sharp objects in the bedroom are frequently associated with relationship conflict. When two people sleep in a space decorated with overly aggressive forms, it may aggravate unconscious competition, irritability, or defensiveness. In my own teaching circles, I've seen couples resolve long-standing nighttime anxiety by making simple changes: removing a set of ceremonial daggers from above their bed, replacing aggressive art with images of nature, or covering metal shelving with fabric. Even without spoken intention, these adjustments shift the field of energy in the room. As one student told me, we stopped snapping at each other in the mornings. It was like something heavy had been lifted. Practical recommendations for a softer, safer sleep space. 1. Audit the bedroom for invisible weapons. Take a tour of your room and notice what sharp objects might be unconsciously causing tension: scissors, knives, box cutters, nail clippers, sewing needles, decorative swords, etc. Remove or store them far from the bed. 2. Choose rounded furniture and soft finishes. Replace angular nightstands with rounded ones. Swap sharp metal handles for wooden or padded ones. Use rugs, throws, and curtains with flowing patterns to soften the visual field. 3. Replace defensive items with symbols of peace. Use peaceful imagery: lotus flowers, open skies, trees, animals at rest. Incorporate objects like smooth stones, crystals, or candles to ground the room in stillness. 4. Create a ritual of letting go before sleep. Instead of placing a sharp object by your bed for protection, write down a single word or phrase you want to release from your day: anger, control, doubt. Fold the paper and place it in a symbolic letting go box. 5. Use the metta or loving unkindness prayer as you prepare for sleep. Say silently or aloud: "May I be safe, may I be peaceful, may my home be a place of rest." This prayer not only reprograms the mind, it energetically blesses the room, replacing aggression with compassion. The Buddha never spoke of bedroom feng shui, but he gave incredibly precise teachings about the influence of place. In the Vinaya monastic code, monks were advised to sleep in places free from weapons, sharp tools, and symbols of violence. This wasn't superstition, it was energetic hygiene. A bedroom is not just a physical location. It is a field of rest, dream, death, and rebirth. Every night we die to the world and are reborn at dawn. What we surround ourselves with during that vulnerable time becomes part of our karmic imprint. Sharp objects tell the nervous system, be alert, be ready, be armed. But sleep requires the opposite: surrender, softness, trust. When we reshape our space to reflect peace, peace begins to reshape us. In the teachings of Zen, there is a saying: how you do anything is how you do everything. If we carelessly allow harshness into our most intimate spaces, it reflects our inner conditioning. But the moment we begin to honor our rest as a sacred act, we start to refine every other aspect of our life as well. Ask yourself tonight, does my bedroom protect me or provoke me? Are the objects here calming or alerting? Do I want to sleep with weapons or with symbols of wisdom? Let your sleep space become a temple where aggression has no place and softness rules. Let your pillow be a cloud, not a battlefield, and let the energy of the room reflect the stillness you are cultivating within. Section 4, religious or sentimental objects. Balancing reverence and rest. In every culture around the world, people are drawn to objects that hold sacred meaning or emotional depth. Whether it's a statue of the Buddha, a family heirloom, a photograph of a departed loved one, or a gift from someone who changed your life, these items become part of our spiritual and emotional ecosystem. They serve as bridges between generations, between memories, and often between ourselves and the divine. But what happens when we bring those emotionally charged or spiritually revered items into the most vulnerable space in our home, our bedroom? More specifically, what happens when they sit just inches from where we lay down each night to let go of all attachment, identity, and mental activity? As it turns out, the answer is more complex than most people realize. These objects, although filled with positive intentions, can subtly disturb our ability to rest deeply and restore ourselves fully, unless they are positioned and engaged with consciously. Let's begin by stating the obvious. Sacred or sentimental items are not bad. In fact, they can be incredible sources of strength, inspiration, and protection. In Buddhism, statues of the Buddha are often placed in homes, monasteries, and meditation centers to represent the triple gem: the Buddha, awakening; the Dharma, truth; and the Sangha, community. But sacred does not always mean soothing, especially when the energy of the item is intense. Sacred objects carry charge. They are energetically potent. They are, in a sense, alive with symbolism and emotion. When placed in a space that is meant for letting go, like the bedroom, they may stir the subconscious mind more than we realize. The energy of sacred items is often upward moving, awakening, or activating. But rest, in both biological and spiritual terms, is downward moving, calming, and dissolving. When these energies meet, especially during deep sleep or liminal dream states, they may create tension rather than comfort. In Theravada monastic tradition, the Buddha's image is placed high, often on an altar above head level, in a clean, dedicated area. It is never placed on the floor or directly beside a sleeping space. The reasoning is not merely respectful, it's energetic. The act of lying down beside or below a sacred object is traditionally discouraged because it subconsciously places you in a passive or inferior position to a symbol that is meant to inspire uprightness and vigilance. Moreover, altars and sacred spaces are places of active engagement, bowing, chanting, meditation. The bedroom, by contrast, is a space of release. Placing the sacred too close to where we attempt to surrender can lead to subtle internal conflict, as if one part of the psyche is being asked to revere, while the other part is being asked to relax. The Buddha taught that every activity has its proper place. When you eat, just eat. When you sit, just sit. When you rest, just rest. This includes how we interact with the sacred. Let's talk now about sentimental items. These may not be religious, but they are often spiritually loaded. A letter from a former lover, a childhood toy, a pendant passed down from a grandparent, a photo of someone who passed away. These objects are emotional time capsules. They carry frequencies of the past, both joy and pain, and often hold unresolved emotions, even if they seem harmless at first glance. A client I once worked with had trouble falling asleep in her new apartment. Her room was beautifully designed, minimal, and peaceful, yet she still tossed and turned. Upon exploration, I discovered a small jewelry box on her nightstand containing her father's pocket watch. Her father had passed unexpectedly, and although she thought she had made peace with it, she admitted that the watch brought up sadness, especially at night. Every time I look at it, she said, I feel both comfort and grief. I didn't realize how much it still pulled me. We eventually moved the watch to a living room shelf where she could see it during the tea but not during sleep. Her insomnia decreased significantly. "Now I feel like I can rest without guilt," she told me. This is not unusual. The subconscious mind, especially during hypnagogic and dream states, processes emotional memory much more intensely than we do while awake. Objects that carry sorrow, nostalgia, or unresolved relationships may whisper into our sleeping psyche, pulling energy backward instead of allowing it to replenish. From a neuroscientific viewpoint, our brains are associative. They link memories, emotions, and even sensory cues to physical objects. Seeing a sentimental item, even peripherally, activates the hippocampus, memory center, and amygdala, emotion center. If those memories are unresolved or bittersweet, the brain may enter a mild stress state. When this happens near bedtime, cortisol, the stress hormone, is released, and melatonin, the sleep hormone, is suppressed. This delays sleep onset and reduces sleep depth. The problem is that we often don't realize this is happening. The jewelry box on the dresser or the wedding photo on the wall seems neutral, but it may be energetically asking for emotional attention just as the body is trying to surrender. The late Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh was known for his deeply respectful treatment of sacred items. In Plum Village, his monastery in France, meditation halls and sleeping quarters are carefully separated. Altars and Buddha statues are never placed in bedrooms. Instead, they are in open, shared spaces dedicated to practice. Why? Because the sleeping area is meant to be a zone of total release, not devotion. In a 2008 interview, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was asked whether he keeps sacred images in his bedroom. He smiled and said, "No, my prayer space is in another room. Where I sleep, where I pray. Even high-profile non-Buddhist figures understand this. Michelle Obama, in her memoir Becoming, wrote about creating a calm, clutter-free bedroom where no emotional distractions were allowed, not even personal photos. "I wanted the room to feel like a place where I could just breathe, not remember," she explained. This isn't about detachment. It's about respecting the function of space and allowing our emotional system the chance to exhale fully. Many people keep sacred or sentimental items near their bed because they feel obligated. "This was my grandmother's," they say. "I can't just put it away." Or, "If I don't display the Buddha statue, I'm being disrespectful." But Buddhism teaches that true respect arises from clarity, not performance. If an object is being placed out of guilt rather than joy, it may carry that energetic imprint into the environment. This is especially true when it comes to items associated with death or loss. Keeping a photo of a deceased loved one near your head while you sleep may seem comforting, but it often keeps the energy of grief subtly active, preventing the psyche from fully resting. Likewise, keeping spiritual items where they may become dusty, neglected, or unconsciously ignored can create inner dissonance. Reverence requires engagement. If we're not actively engaging with an altar or object, it's better to relocate it to a space where it can be honored appropriately. How to balance sacredness and serenity. 1. Create a dedicated sacred space. If you wish to display sacred or sentimental items, consider setting up a small altar in a separate room, hallway, or corner. This allows the energy of reverence to flourish without interfering with sleep. 2. Store emotional items. Mindfully, use keepsake boxes, drawers, or closed shelves to store sentimental items out of view while sleeping. This doesn't dishonor them, it honors your need for rest. 3. Use soft covers for sacred items at night. In some traditions, cloth is used to cover altars or religious statues at night. This allows the space to symbolically sleep alongside you and reduces the energetic contrast. 4. Designate objects for active versus passive engagement. If an item stirs active memory, emotion, or devotion, place it outside the bedroom. If it evokes calm, spaciousness, or balance, it may be okay to keep nearby. 5. Perform an intention check. Before placing any item near your bed, ask yourself, does this object bring me into the present moment or pull me into the past? Does it activate me or allow me to release? Is it here from love or from obligation? Let your answers guide you. Buddhism reminds us that the root of suffering is attachment, not love, but clinging. Holding tightly to objects, even those that seem spiritually elevated, can reinforce identity and perpetuate suffering if done unconsciously. Releasing doesn't mean forgetting. It means trusting that the spirit of those we love and the teachings we revere do not need constant visual reminders to stay alive within us. In fact, they may be more alive when we give them space to breathe. When we shift our perspective from "this item must be near me always" to "this item holds energy I can engage with intentionally," we move from clinging to communion, from sentimentality to sacredness. The bedroom is not a temple, it is not a shrine, it is a cocoon, a place where the ego dissolves, the heart softens, and the body heals. If we crowd it with reminders of who we were, who we lost, or who we think we should be, we deny ourselves the simple grace of just being. Let your sacred objects rest where they are honored. Let your sentimental treasures rest where they can be appreciated. And let yourself rest, free from the weight of memory, the pull of the pests, or the need to perform reverence. Sleep is the most natural form of surrender. Allow your space to reflect that. Let reverence live in your actions, not just in your arrangement. And may your rest be as sacred as any prayer. Section 5. Bright nightlights. How artificial light disrupts natural restoration. Light is life. From the moment the sun rises, our biology awakens, our hormones shift, our energy levels rise, and our mental clarity sharpens. And when the sun sets, our systems are designed to return to stillness. But in today's modern world, this ancient rhythm has been hijacked by something deceptively gentle: artificial light, especially at night, and especially in the place we need the most restoration, our bedroom. While soft lighting may seem harmless and nightlights may offer comfort or safety, science and spiritual insight both suggest that artificial light at night, particularly the bright blue-tone variety, could be silently dismantling the sacred architecture of our rest. Let's begin with the human body's most important nighttime ally, melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland in response to darkness. It doesn't simply help you fall asleep. It initiates a cascade of biological restoration, regulates circadian rhythm, your internal body clock, lowers blood pressure, reduces body temperature, promotes cellular repairs and detoxification, enhances immune function, stimulates antioxidant activity. The trigger for this miraculous sequence? Absence of light. In Buddhist terms, this transition from light to dark is not just physical. It represents a sacred shift from activity to receptivity. The Dharma teaches that day is for action and night is for integration. When we override that transition with artificial lighting, particularly in the form of bright, white, or blue-tone nightlights, we disrupt this sacred shift. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism confirms that exposure to even low levels of blue light before or during sleep suppresses melatonin production by up to 80%. Blue light is the wavelength emitted by smartphones, LED bulbs, fluorescent lights, and many commercial nightlights. Why does this matter? Because when melatonin is suppressed, our ability to enter deep, restorative sleep diminishes. Instead of spending time in delta wave sleep, crucial for healing and memory, the body hovers in light sleep stages. We may still sleep for 8 hours, but wake up exhausted, irritable, and inflamed. The World Health Organization, WHO, has even classified nighttime light exposure as a probable carcinogen due to its links with hormone disruption and breast cancer risk in night shift workers. This is not fear-mongering, it's science. But it also confirms what traditional Buddhist understanding has known for centuries. Light and dark are not moral opposites. They are spiritual rhythms. And when we violate those rhythms, we violate our own nature. The Buddha is often referred to as the enlightened one, the one who brought light into darkness. But in many Buddhist stories, true insight arises not from literal brightness, but from silence, inwardness, and stillness. Enlightenment does not mean constant illumination. It means knowing when to turn inward. One story from the Zen tradition tells of a young monk who feared the dark and insisted on sleeping with a lamp. The master one night blew it out and said, "If you cannot sit with the dark, you will never see your true nature." That monk went on to become a revered teacher, not through light, but through presence. Light is beautiful, but so is darkness, especially when it is natural, gentle, and restorative. When we fill our sleep space with unnatural light, we're not just stimulating the body, we're pushing away an ancient teacher, silence. Many people keep nightlights for psychological comfort. Perhaps it's a childhood habit. Perhaps it's linked to trauma or fear of being alone. But bright nightlights can inadvertently signal the brain that it's still time to stay alert. A 2016 Harvard study demonstrated that individuals exposed to even dim light during sleep had elevated heart rates, increased cortisol levels, and more fragmented sleep architecture compared to those sleeping in full darkness. What's more, the body never fully switches into parasympathetic nervous system mode, rest and digest, when light is present. Instead, it remains in a subtle fight-or-flight state, continuously scanning the environment. I once worked with a trauma survivor named Elise, who insisted on keeping a bright lamp on in her bedroom just in case. Despite working with therapists and taking sleep aids, her nightmares persisted. After being gently guided to experiment with red-tone ambient lighting and blackout curtains, her night terrors decreased. "I didn't realize I was trying to outrun the dark," she said. "Now I let it hold me." The point isn't to remove comfort, it's to redefine it. Parents often install nightlights in children's rooms to comfort them or help them find their way to the bathroom. But new research from the University of Colorado Boulder shows that early exposure to artificial light can interfere with the development of a child's circadian rhythm. Children need darkness to build a healthy relationship with sleep and safety. When we teach them that light equals security, we inadvertently teach them that darkness is dangerous, an association that may follow them into adulthood. In Buddhist parenting traditions, children are often taught that the night is for the heart and that dreams are messengers, not enemies. A simple candle, safely placed and extinguished before sleep, may offer more spiritual and emotional assurance than any glowing plastic owl. Some of the world's highest performers and deepest thinkers prioritize darkness when it comes to rest. Arianna Huffington, author of The Sleep Revolution, sleeps in a pitch-black room and insists that even LED alarm clock lights are disruptive. "We think of light as productivity," she says, "but sleep is a form of productivity, too." LeBron James uses blackout curtains and prohibits any kind of artificial light in his sleeping quarters during the NBA season. "Sleep is the foundation of performance," he says. Neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman of Stanford University strongly recommends eliminating all light from the bedroom. He emphasizes that even small amounts of blue or white light, like a digital clock display, can negatively affect hormone balance and next-day alertness. None of these people are monks, yet they understand something essential. Darkness is a resource. It is not the absence of growth. It is the soil where growth begins. Let's talk about the energetic field for a moment. In subtle body teachings, like those found in Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, light has vibration. White light is often associated with purity and awareness. But artificial white light, especially from LEDs, is cold, erratic, and stimulating. It pulses at unnatural frequencies, creating discordance in the body's biofield. This kind of discord shows up energetically as restlessness before sleep, anxious dreams, excessive mental chatter, difficulty accessing dream recall, subtle body twitches during sleep. By contrast, darkness, or soft, warm lighting in red and amber hues, is considered grounding. It resonates with the Muladhara root chakra, supporting safety and stillness. When the body's energy centers are in harmony with the environment, sleep becomes a spiritual retreat, not just biological recovery. How to create a truly restorative sleep environment. 1. Eliminate all bright night lights. If safety is a concern, use motion-activated floor lights that emit warm amber or red tones. These do not interfere with melatonin and allow navigation without overstimulation. 2. Use red-tone night bulbs or salt lamps. Red light has the least impact on circadian rhythm and even enhances dream vividness. Himalayan salt lamps, when dimmed, offer a comforting glow that feels nurturing rather than intrusive. 3. Install blackout curtains. Even city street lights or neighbor porch lights can interfere with sleep. Invest in high-quality blackout curtains to simulate complete darkness. 4. Remove electronic light sources, digital clocks, power strip lights, Wi-Fi router LEDs. Cover or eliminate them. Even one blinking light can stimulate the brain's photoreceptors. 5. Candle rituals. Use candlelight during your nighttime routine. The slow flicker encourages the body to shift naturally into sleep mode. Blow out the candle before lying down and use this moment to say a simple prayer or mindfulness affirmation. 6. Replace the nightlight with presence. If your nightlight is there for emotional comfort, consider replacing it with a spiritual anchor, a soft pillow, a mala bead necklace nearby, or a piece of calming music. Teach the body that safety does not require constant brightness. It requires conscious attention. A Buddhist nighttime prayer for stillness. As you prepare for sleep, consider this Buddhist-inspired verse. Into the stillness I now descend, free from thought, free from end. May the dark be my gentle guide, where ego sleeps and peace resides. This kind of mindful closure to the day realigns our energetic field with nature's rhythm. No light required, only presence. Light is not the enemy, but unconscious, excessive, or poorly timed light is. If we want to reclaim the sacred space of our bedrooms, not as storage rooms for anxiety, but as sanctuaries for renewal, we must become stewards of light. We must learn to dim, to soften, to close our eyes without resistance. In the dark, you do not disappear. You return. To breathe, to quiet, to your true self. Let the night come. Let the body listen. Let your light, the one within, rise as the external world dims. Section 6. Books and work documents. How mental clutter invades physical rest. In the still hours before sleep, when the body begins to loosen and the breath slows, the mind craves spaciousness. But for many of us, our bedrooms are not sanctuaries of silence. They're extensions of our to-do lists. Laptops on the nightstand, notebooks full of deadlines, piles of unread books, folders containing tax returns, self-help guides urging us to wake up earlier or do more. These objects, while seemingly benign, carry an invisible weight, a hum of expectation, a whisper of pressure that disrupts one of the most important spiritual and biological functions we possess. True rest. This is not just about organization. It's about energetic hygiene, about reclaiming rest as a sacred act, and about understanding how the objects around us, especially books and work-related materials, become mental anchors, pulling us out of presence and into perpetual readiness. In Buddhism, rest is not laziness, it is insight. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha emphasizes the importance of knowing when to engage and when to release. Rest is part of the Eightfold Path under right effort, the conscious cultivation of mental clarity, and the abandoning of states that cause agitation. But rest requires more than just physical stillness. It requires the removal of subtle mental stimulation, especially the kind triggered by unfinished tasks. Work materials, whether a briefcase, a laptop bag, a printed presentation, or even a single sticky note, emit an energetic frequency that says, "You're not done yet." They are not inert. They are charged with identity, responsibility, and often anxiety. Books, even if unread, often signal the same. They represent information waiting to be processed, ideas we think we should absorb, or areas where we feel we're falling short. When these items live near our sleep space, they subtly keep the mind on edge, like leaving one foot on the gas pedal even after the car has been parked. The psychological phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect explains why incomplete tasks stay active in our working memory. Named after Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, this effect shows that our brains are more likely to recall and ruminate over unfinished tasks than completed ones. That unopened book on your nightstand, your brain doesn't view it as decor, it views it as a loop that needs to be closed. That unopened envelope from HR, a signal that something unresolved is nearby. This constant low-level awareness keeps the sympathetic nervous system, i.e. now fight or flight, mildly activated. Cortisol levels remain elevated. The mind cannot descend into full parasympathetic recovery, rest and digest, which is essential for deep sleep. It's no wonder so many people lie in bed staring at the ceiling. their bodies tired but their minds still on. In Buddhist teaching, the idea of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, is often likened to unfinished business. Craving tanamhanha keeps the wheel turning. The goal is not to escape action, but to move with intentionality and to complete things in a state of mindfulness, not compulsion. Keeping undone work in the bedroom reinforces samsaric habits. It ties our sense of self-worth to productivity. It turns sleep into an interruption of action rather than a liberation from it. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "Don't just do something, sit there." This radical reversal reminds us that being is as sacred as doing. But how can we just be when our bed is surrounded by things asking us to think, learn, or perform? I once counseled a mindfulness student named Eric, a 32-year-old financial analyst. He suffered from insomnia and chronic anxiety. His room was immaculately clean, but his nightstand held a towering stack of books, mostly business, finance, and self-improvement titles. On the floor beside his bed, a leather briefcase, always zipped but never moved. He admitted that every time he lay down, he felt guilty. "It's like I'm stealing time from my own success," he said. We spoke about renunciation, not as giving up, but as conscious space-making. Over the next 2 weeks, he removed the books, stored the briefcase in his closet, and replaced them with a simple candle and a tiny journal for gratitude. Within days, his sleep deepened. "I finally feel like I'm allowed to rest," he told me. Sometimes freedom isn't found in doing more. It's in letting 1 square meter of your life become a temple of non-doing. Some of the world's most effective people are learning that real power comes from stillness, not stimulation. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, insists on puttering at night. He reads light fiction, not business books, before bed and keeps work materials out of the bedroom. "I need my sleep more than I need to hustle at midnight," he says. Oprah Winfrey shared in her wellness column that she no longer allows business documents or even inspirational material in her bedroom. "I used to think my bed was a classroom," she jokes. "Now it's a sanctuary." Michelle Obama, during her White House years, created a strict boundary around her bedroom. "That was my space to breathe," she said. "No work papers, no political talk, just rest." What these individuals understand is that true restoration is an investment in clarity. And clarity doesn't come from multitasking. It comes from sacred spaciousness. In subtle energy practices like Reiki and Vajrayana Buddhism, paper carries vibration. Letters, books, and documents are said to retain the imprint of their content. A tax document carries urgency. A divorce paper carries emotion. A motivational book carries striving. When we place these items near where we sleep, we are essentially asking our subtle body to hold their vibration overnight. This is why Buddhist monks often store sacred texts above eye level and away from sleeping areas, out of reverence for their energy and out of respect for rest. The point is not to treat books as enemies. The point is to acknowledge their potency. Just as food affects our digestion, information affects our vibration. We must choose wisely what we surround ourselves with when our defenses are down. Many people read before bed. This can be deeply calming or subtly activating, depending on the material. Nonfiction, especially in areas of self-improvement or spirituality, often stimulates reflection, comparison, and evaluation. Fiction can either soothe when it's gentle and rhythmic, or excite when it's plot-heavy or emotionally intense. Sleep researchers at Harvard recommend reading for no more than 15 to 20 minutes before sleep, using soft, warm lighting, and choosing material that calms rather than provokes. Buddhist sutras, poetry, or classic teachings like the Dhammapada are ideal, as they induce contemplative states rather than analytical ones. One of my own teachers once said, "Never read anything that makes you question your worth before sleep. Read only what reminds you of your timeless nature." Practical ways to clear mental clutter from the bedroom. 1. Remove all work materials from the bedroom. Auto-restore laptops, folders, journals, and office supplies in a separate room if possible. If space is limited, use a closed drawer or basket to keep them out of sight. 2. Create a work closure ritual. At the end of your workday, light a candle or bell to signify the transition. Say silently, "This work is done for now. My body and mind now return to stillness." 3. Curate a nightstand that calms. Replace books that activate you with ones that soothe you. Try poetry, Dharma reflections, or nature writing. Keep only one book on the nightstand at a time. 4. Journal for letting go. Instead of reading work notes, keep a small notebook for gratitude or release. Write down one thing you are proud of each night and one thing you are letting go of. 5. Visual minimalism. Clear your sleeping area of visual to-dos. No vision boards, calendars, or productivity quotes. Replace them with symbols of peace, a bowl of stones, a soft scarf, a small statue of the Buddha. 6. A bedtime affirmation for spaciousness. As you lie down each night, try this simple affirmation. I release the weight of unfinished things. I am not my tasks. I am not my striving. In this moment, I am whole. I welcome sleep as my true teacher. Rest is not a reward, it is a requirement. In Buddhist understanding, rest allows the seeds of wisdom, bija, to settle. Without rest, our soil is too dry for anything to grow. Books and work documents are not enemies, they are tools. But when we turn our sacred rest space into a mini office or classroom, we confuse our mind. We mix messages. We invite striving into our dreams. Make your bedroom a threshold, not a desk. Let the mind shed its labels. Let the heart be still. Let rest become not what you earn, but who you are. Section 7. Fresh flowers or indoor plants. Navigating nature in the bedroom. To bring nature indoors is an instinct as old as human civilization. We long for the scent of jasmine, the curve of a fern, the calm presence of greenery in our sacred spaces. Houseplants, fresh-cut flowers, and floral arrangements have long been considered symbols of life, vitality, and even spiritual abundance. But what happens when these gifts of nature cross into the realm of rest? When they become fixtures near our beds, beside our pillows, within the breath of sleep? Do they nurture our slumber, or do they subtly interfere with the deep surrender we seek each night? As we explore this question, we must set aside assumptions. Just because something is beautiful doesn't mean it's always helpful. And just because nature is healing doesn't mean every expression of it is appropriate in every space. In Buddhism, nature is seen not only as sacred, but also as alive with energy. A tree may be a teacher, a flower, a symbol of impermanence, a rock, a reminder of stability. Yet within monastic traditions, natural elements are used with deliberate intention. Fresh flowers, for instance, are often offered on altars, but they are not placed casually. They are selected for color, meaning, and the season, and replaced the moment they begin to wilt. Why? Because the fading of the flower reminds us of anicca, impermanence. But never are fresh flowers or plants placed near the head where one sleeps. In monasteries from Thailand to Tibet, sleeping quarters are kept minimal, free from overly fragrant or animated decor. The reason is energetic. The mind must descend into stillness, not be surrounded by stimuli, even those that appear gentle or lovely. Plants, like humans, have biological rhythms. During the day, through photosynthesis, they absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. This is why indoor plants are praised for purifying the air. However, at night, photosynthesis ceases. Most plants switch into respiration mode, absorbing oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. In a tightly sealed bedroom, especially with poor ventilation, this can slightly reduce air quality. For sensitive individuals, this may contribute to feelings of congestion, poor sleep, or mild headaches upon waking. Let's be clear, most houseplants release only trace amounts of CO2, not enough to endanger health. But when the goal is to create an optimal rest environment, even subtle shifts matter. Sleep is delicate, and cumulative factors, scent, air quality, humidity, and energy can make the difference between tossing and turning and deep restoration. Fresh flowers like lilies, jasmine, or gardenias emit potent fragrances. While this can feel intoxicating or romantic during waking hours, it can become overwhelming at night. Strong scents engage the limbic system, the part of the brain that processes emotion and memory. While awake, this may stimulate joy or nostalgia. But during sleep, especially in REM phases, scent can trigger vivid dreams, emotional restlessness, or subconscious arousal. In fact, a 2009 study published in the journal Chemosensory Perception found that participants exposed to pleasant smells like roses while sleeping had more positive dreams, while unpleasant odors led to negative ones. However, even positive scents disrupted normal sleep cycles in some participants. Buddhist mindfulness encourages us to be aware of all sense inputs, not just visual or auditory, but olfactory and tactile as well. Smell, being one of the most primal senses, is often the most underestimated in its power to influence sleep. I once worked with a meditation teacher named Anjali, who kept fresh jasmine blossoms in a bowl on her bedside table every night. She loved the smell. It reminded her of her grandmother's home in Kerala, India, but she complained of difficulty staying asleep and often woke feeling emotionally heavy. At my suggestion, she moved the flowers to a small altar in her meditation space and kept the bedroom scent-free for 2 weeks. The results? It was like my dreams finally had room to breathe, she said. I didn't know I was overstimulating myself with something I loved. This is the paradox. Even comfort can become a distraction when it prevents surrender. Even beauty, when placed without mindfulness, can subtly burden the spirit. In Feng Shui and Buddhist cosmology, plants carry yang energy. They grow, move, respond, and breathe. They are considered energetically active, especially when compared to yin elements like rocks, sand, or still water. The bedroom, especially during sleep hours, is meant to hold predominantly yin energy, quiet, depth, inwardness. When we place yang objects like large leafy plants, blooming flowers, or creeping vines, in this space we may unintentionally introduce movement where stillness is needed. This doesn't mean that all plants are bad for sleep spaces, but it does mean that size, type, placement, and intention matter. In the monastic tradition, everything has its place. The kitchen is for food, the zendo is for meditation, the bedroom is for rest. Bringing fresh elements into the bedroom is not forbidden. It's just guided by mindfulness. Some principles to consider. Avoid flowering plants near the bed. Limit plants to 1 or 2 small varieties. Use clay or natural pots rather than shiny or metal containers. Choose plants with rounded leaves, not spiky or upward arching ones. Water in the morning to avoid creating nighttime humidity. Keep plants at least 3 feet away from the head. Plants that have been traditionally favored in bedrooms include snake plant, Sansevieria, releases oxygen at night. Peace lily, calming shape and soft energy. Aloe vera, gentle, air purifying and symbolically soothing. Lavender, if used, only in small doses. Too much can overstimulate. Avoid strongly scented flowers like lilies or gardenia. Bonsai trees symbolize control, pruning, restriction. Cacti, sharp energy. Creeping ivy can feel invasive, especially near the bed. Another overlooked concern with fresh flowers: decay. Flowers begin to die the moment they're cut. Within 24 to 48 hours, even the most vibrant bouquet begins its return to the earth. The Buddhist lesson of impermanence is on full display. But do we really want to breathe in the scent of decline while we sleep? Wilting flowers carry stagnant qi, life energy. Their energetic frequency lowers. Some practitioners even consider this yin congestion, which can attract melancholy, sluggishness, or even spiritual heaviness. Sleep is a rebirth every night. Aligning it with fresh decay may subtly interfere with our own regenerative processes. Beyond biology and energy, plants and flowers often carry emotional symbolism. A rose from a former lover, a potted orchid from a funeral, a tulip from a forgotten spring. These items may be beautiful, but their emotional charge may be less restful than we realize. Buddhist psychology teaches that clinging to memory can block present moment awareness. When your bedroom is filled with plants or flowers tied to emotional events, you may be unconsciously keeping one foot in the past. I once met a couple who kept a dying bonsai tree in their bedroom because it had been a gift from the husband's father. Every time they entered the room, they felt off, but couldn't explain why. The moment they relocated the bonsai to a shared space and replaced it with a simple vase of bamboo, the room's energy shifted completely. What we hold on to affects what we become, And what surrounds our rest can either reinforce or release our attachments. Practical suggestions for harmonious plant use. 1. Keep it minimal. Choose 1 to 2 plants max in the bedroom. Let the space breathe. 2. Use plants with gentle energy. Prefer soft leaves, neutral growth patterns, and plants known to purify air at night. 3. Avoid scented flowers. Keep strongly scented or pollen-heavy blooms out of the bedroom. Place them in shared living areas instead. 4. Monitor decay. Change water frequently. Remove wilting leaves. Replace or compost flowers before they begin to rot. 5. Cleanse the energy. Wipe leaves gently every week. Offer gratitude to the plant. Consider ringing a bell or lighting incense in the room to clear stagnant chi. 6. Let go of emotional clutter. If a plant or flower carries unresolved grief, move it out of the rest space until the emotion is processed. Let the plant live, but not in your sleep. A Buddhist-inspired sleep affirmation with nature. Before sleep, if you have a plant nearby, you might gently place your hand on the pot or leaf and say, "May I, like this plant, grow in silence. May my breath slow like roots into the earth. May I release the day like leaves into wind. May I bloom again in the light of morning." Final reflection. Nature is sacred, but so is sleep. The lesson here is not about banning plants or flowers from the bedroom. It's about intention. Nature in its pure form is a healer. But when brought into the bedroom without mindfulness, when we surround ourselves with fragrance, symbolism, or movement, we may be inviting more stimulation than we realize. Sleep is the doorway to non-doing. Let your space reflect that. Let your breath mirror a forest at rest. Let your body become soil. Let your dreams be unburdened by fragrance, by memory, by maintenance. Let sleep be your garden, and let silence be its rain. You made it to the end, and perhaps now something feels different. Not just about your bedroom, but about how you see it. What was once just a space to collapse into at the end of a long day now feels more alive, more intentional, more sacred. Because what you've uncovered today is not just about electronics, mirrors, or misplaced notebooks. It's about a relationship, the one between you and your space. You see, we live in a culture that celebrates action. More hours, more output, more information. But few of us are ever taught how to rest in a way that truly restores us. We think rest means doing nothing. But in Buddhist practice, rest is doing something extraordinary. It's surrender, it's renewal, it's a return to source. And that kind of rest requires trust. To fall deeply asleep, you must trust that you are safe. Trust that the day is complete. Trust that you are enough, even without solving one more problem, reading one more page, or checking one more notification. But how can we trust in that way when the objects around us whisper otherwise? A glowing phone says, "There's more to do." A stack of books says, "You haven't learned enough." A mirror says, "Look at yourself." A document says, "You're not finished." Even a beautiful flower may say, "Don't forget this memory." Each object, consciously or not, carries a vibration. And now you know how to listen. Maybe you're already thinking of what to shift in your space. Maybe a device to unplug, a photo to relocate, a book to place lovingly on a distant shelf. Or maybe it's simply the realization that your bedroom is not just a room, it's a temple. Yes, a temple. Not in the religious sense, but in the spiritual sense. A space where your spirit rests. A space where your mind uncoils. A space where your body is not pushed, prodded, or judged, but allowed to melt into pure being. And just as monks sweep their temples daily, not just to clean, but to honor, so too can you begin to sweep your bedroom energetically. Start small, start mindfully, because this is not about perfection, it's about presence. The first step in transforming your sleep is not a new mattress or fancy supplements. It's awareness. And from awareness, everything becomes possible. Now you know, sleep is not something to fight for, it is something to clear space for. So tonight, as you prepare for bed, do it with intention. Light a candle, dim the lights, place your phone far away, remove anything that stirs anxiety or memory. Invite in softness, stillness, simplicity, and say silently as you lie down, I honor the rest I receive. I release the day behind me. I welcome the silence that heals. Let your body become earth. Let your breath become wind. Let your thoughts dissolve like clouds into night. You are safe. You are enough. You are allowed to rest. Thank you for walking this mindful journey with me today. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment below, something you're choosing to release from your space, or one change you're inspired to make. Share it with someone you love. And if you'd like to continue exploring mindful living, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. May your sleep tonight be deep. May your space become sacred. And may every new day begin with clarity, energy, and peace. Until next time, this is New Day Mindfulness.